Hi, everyone. I see people are rolling in. Welcome. As you're joining today, let us know in the chat where you're calling from. I'm in Hoboken, New Jersey. And Kate, where are you? I know where you are, but I'd love for everyone to hear.
I'm in Chicago. We had a big snowstorm these last couple days, so it is nice and snowy here, which is fun.
Yeah, that's awesome. See Jacksonville, Worcester, am I pronouncing that right? Massachusetts. My husband's from Massachusetts. Anchorage. Oh, hi, Brittany. Brittany's one of our members. Mississippi. Welcome everyone. I'm gonna give everyone just a minute to join and get settled, and then we're gonna dive right in. It's so great to see everyone. Denver, hi Ada, yay, so glad you could make it. Kate and I were chatting before, we came on live, and, we've had such a great response with this webinar because I think the topic of money is a huge one when it comes to making a career transition, obviously, and then also just with the new year. I know there's a lot going on with the pandemic. A lot of people are in a career transition already, and this is just, I'm really, really excited for this conversation. Hello, Elle, Castle Rock, Colorado. I love it. Amazing. Hi, Kirsten. Oh, good to see you. Belma, I know what you meant. All right, amazing. Hi, Alita. Good to see you. Oh my gosh, I love it. I see some of our members and clients are on. All right, so as you're getting settled today, please take a moment to just, turn off all distractions. If you have your phone near you, please turn it off or put it away. If you have lots of tabs open, close them. This is your hour for yourself to be present. I really feel that is the best gift that you can give yourself today, just taking time to focus on one thing. I promise you, you will get so much more out of this call today if you're present and fully listening. And yeah, I'll cover some quick logistics before we get started. So we are recording the call. I'm going to send it out after with an amazing resource that Kate has for us. Please feel free to use the chat throughout the session. I can't stress enough the amazing people that we have in the Work Bigger community. So really just, as you're listening to Kate and, as we're chatting, if something resonates with you, share it in the chat. It might shed an insight for someone else here today. So I highly encourage you using that, just making it more fun for all of you. And then if you have a question, please share it in the Q&A box. We're gonna leave some time at the end to go over questions. So again, as Kate and I are chatting, just think through, what questions are coming up for me? What is most relevant for me right now? What are my own struggles around money and making a career change? This is, again, like your time to have some of these challenges addressed, and I couldn't be more excited to be here with you all and with Kate today. All right, so with that, yeah, so let's dive in. Kate, I'm so excited to welcome you to this call. Kate is a money coach and the founder of Beyond Money, and I'm gonna let her introduce herself. So Kate, with that, we'd love to just, hear a little bit more about your story, who you are, what got you here, and we'll take it from there.
Totally. Well, I'm so happy to be here with all of you today. Like Belma said, I'm Kate and I'm a money coach, and I really help people maximize their personal financial lives. So what do you do with this paycheck that you get every month, or with this income from your business? How do you actually break it down into spending in a life that's going to work for you, as opposed to feeling like your money's sort of always out of your control and a stressful force in your life. We want it to be, a real tool to access the life that you want. And so that's what I help people with. And I really got into money coaching out of personal need for the service more than anything. Several years ago, I was diagnosed with chronic Lyme disease and had to go through a big career transition of my own. I had to really abruptly leave my job, my career. I was well paid, comfortably earning, and had to transition to being a full-time unemployed patient. And I really, really began to experience the degree to which financial stress or financial instability of any sort can eat away at like every aspect of your well-being. And I really tried to find help for this, but I, helped sort of realigning like my spending with my new health priorities. My life had changed so radically and I just didn't know how to budget my money anymore. And the more I dove into this and, tried to like learn the tools to change it around for myself, I just began talking to friends and family about money so much more. And I saw that so many people in my life, so many people that I was really close with were experiencing super high degrees of financial stress. It's just that it's usually something that we're so closed about that we don't even tell our closest friends, our family, sometimes even our partners. And I just knew that I had to like do my part to change that. So that's why I started my company a couple of years ago, to help people just with that.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. What resonates with me so much about your story, Kate, and what resonated with me too when we first spoke was just the painful experience you had around Lyme disease, and then experiencing this complete shift in your life and in your lifestyle and in your well-being. And it sounds like your mission, your purpose, the work that you're doing was born right out of this struggle that you experienced. Would you say that's right?
Yeah, truly. And, we all, obviously I don't wish my experience on anybody else, but I think we all tend to think that like those things will never happen to us. And hopefully they won't to most of us, but most of us go through something at some point. And let me tell you, having like your finances in order so that you can make those transitions seamlessly, so you don't have to make financially based decisions during a big life change or a big emotional time. You don't want to have to make those decisions based off money. You want to have the money sorted so that you can then do what's needed in your life.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to just dive right into the money piece, right? Tell us a little bit what is money coaching?
Totally. That is a really, really good question, because it's not something that most of us are super familiar with. In the financial service industry, like we all know that you can find an investment manager, you can find an accountant, you can find somebody to help with like insurance products and all of that. But money coaching is really more about your day-to-day finances. How do you take like this money that you earn and figure out a strategy so you can pay off your debt, meet your savings goals, and then also, live a life that you like in the meantime, live your sort of ideal lifestyle, but also take care of your future and your obligations. And it's such an important part of it, and yet something that somehow most of us have, or the financial service industry, has traditionally not catered towards.
Yeah, well, I think money, right? And you mentioned like there's like investment managers, and sometimes that can feel really inaccessible, especially when you are in like a big life pivot, right? Which is what you were going through, or in a career transition, right? So, and then you also hit on how we don't really talk about money. I think there's a lot of shame associated with it. Yeah. Is there anything coming up for you? Go ahead.
No, for sure. I mean, I think especially what you're first saying about it being like financial advisors being inaccessible, because usually they want you to have like $500,000 to invest before it's worth it for them to take you on as a client. And that is no shade to them. Like they have a business model and they need to earn revenue the same way the rest of us need to earn paychecks or be business revenue or whatever. But it's just that model is forgetting so many of us. Even if you earn a really good salary, even if you earn, 100, 200, whatever $1,000 a year, for most of us, like after we pay our rent or our mortgage, after we save for our kids' college, after we go on like 1 or 2 vacations a year, there isn't, tens of thousands of dollars left to invest, outside of like your 401k and stuff. And so most of us have just not, been served by traditional investment managers. And I think that all of us, are deserving of financial help, regardless of our asset level or our income level.
Thank you. So perfectly said.
Okay.
Let's dive in. So, one of the things that I shared, or, you and I were planning out this conversation, was we wanted to highlight three things, right, that we need to know to prepare for that career transition. So I'd love to just dive into that now and talk about, what are those three things that we need to know if you're making a career pivot, right? And there's all of these issues and questions and challenges that are popping up. I even see, like, in the chat, people are already sharing. I know some of my members and clients in Work Bigger are in the middle of the job search, right? So I'd love to hear a little bit more, and we'll take it from there.
Totally. So the first thing that I say, and this is where I start with all of my clients, is figuring out what your actual spending is. And I know this sounds really simplistic and probably really obvious, but very few of us know what we are actually spending on a month-to-month basis. And I know this for a fact because I have all of my clients, start with like estimating their spending, writing what they think they're spending on, groceries or delivery or shopping or whatever. And then we start actually manually tracking their spending. And I have never had anybody be within like 20% accurate. So regardless of your income, if you're playing with tens of thousands of dollars a month or hundreds of dollars a month, like I have never had anybody get a close guess. And so I think that is the place that all of us need to start, to just actually figure out what you are actually spending, not what you want to be spending, not what you think you should be spending, but what is like actually going out of your bank account as we speak.
Got it. Okay, so I completely agree with you, because when I was leaving corporate to run Work Bigger full time, I would always like estimate the numbers. I'm like, well, this is what I'm bringing in every month. And it wasn't until I started like tracking it every single day and then adding that up. Sometimes that can feel really daunting. What do you suggest? What is a good way to do that, to start manually tracking your expenses?
Yeah, so I just have a pretty simple spreadsheet that I use for my clients. And if any of you want to email me, I'd be happy to share the spreadsheet with you that I use for people. And, I really like that to start with, just keeping it like simple and manual. I think that apps like Mint and stuff that passively track it for you can be great for maintenance, but that's only once your spending is like already under control and you're using that to make sure it stays under control. But I think that for the sort of investigation period, like manually writing down or typing into a spreadsheet every day, here's what I spent at Whole Foods, here's what I spent, at Starbucks, whatever, and just writing it down really, really helps. So I have it sort of like spread out then into like your different categories. And I think the categories are important to customize for yourself. Like none of us have like generic spreadsheet, lives. And so I think it's really important to customize it to yourself. Like, yeah, somebody wrote in the spreadsheet that they use You Need a Budget, which is also great. Mint can be good, but any of these you can like edit the categories. And to give you an example, I have a client who she has eating out broken into like 4 different categories. One for eating out with her boyfriend, one for eating out with her family, one for getting like takeout for herself, and one for like social eating out with friends. And most of us might think that is wild to have 4 eating out categories, but that's what works for her. So yeah, the more personalized you can make it, the more useful you'll find it.
I love that. I love that, because then you can kind of see like the details of like where your money is going, right? Yeah. Versus just like food, which is so broad. One tool that I use too that I found really helpful is Expense Tracker. If you're on Android, like I am, it's just like so easy to, like if you don't have access to a spreadsheet, I found that was really helpful, just adding it in. And it became a habit. So there was one week where I wasn't doing it. I'm like, this feels really weird. I need to be adding in my expenses. And it just allows you to become more conscious about where your money is going. And Alita, I see, she said, like, I was really overspending. Yeah. You don't realize, you're like, oh, $20 on, Amazon here, $10 for coffee there. And then before you know it, it's all adding up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. So let's talk about the second thing. What is the second thing we need to know to make a career transition and, the money piece?
Yeah, so I think like the second one is figuring out what the like actual true market rate for your new position would be. And I a couple of years ago was at a talk that Aminatou So from Call Your Girlfriend, the podcast, was giving, and she gave like the best advice that I've ever heard for this. She said, when you are trying to figure out like a promotion or a new role or something, to find like a few white men on LinkedIn and just message them who are in similar roles, and just message them and ask what they are making. And she said that like 9 times out of 10, they will respond because they don't have our fears around talking about money. Men are generally happy to talk about it. So figure out what they are being paid, and then, your market rate. And I would say don't get as hung up on, what you think you like should be paid for the role, or what your past roles dictate your salary should be, or anything like that. Like, you need to figure out the cold, hard facts of like what you can and should actually be paid in this new position.
I love that. And Ada says that's genius. I couldn't agree more. I mean, I'd never thought of doing that. And I think that's so brilliant, because then you're getting the data, and you're getting the data, pushing past that bias, right? Not like really asking like other people who are in your position. But I love the, go to a white male who is in that position, or a few of them. I think it's really important. I love the idea of getting that data from different sources, so that, you're kind of covering all your bases, and then you can put all of that together and see, okay, what is that market rate? What is that number that I should not necessarily aim for, but what is possible? Like, what is the reality of the situation?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think especially when, oftentimes when we're looking at a career transition, it's I mean, this is an overgeneralization, but it's often, to a career that we realize we want like higher work-life balance, or want to feel more fulfilled in it, or some of these things. And oftentimes that comes with a pay cut. And so figuring out like, what this new role can actually pay you.
Yeah. Awesome. What else? So what is the third thing that we need to do?
Yeah. So my third thing would be, again, like going with the idea that oftentimes career transitions are to careers that we like care about more, which can often, not always the case, but can often come with a lower salary. I highly, highly, highly recommend really figuring out if you can and if you want to actually live on this new salary. I think we tend to really underestimate we tend to underestimate the difference that a change in salary will make in our lives. I was just talking to a friend last night, actually, who she's a marketing director at a pretty big company, and she recently got a new job and took a $20,000 pay cut to get it, because she felt like she'd have better work-life balance, that it was something where she felt like she could make a bigger difference, all of these things. And now she's realizing that like that, maybe $1,000 a month, after taxes, like is really, really, really messing up her day-to-day life, in a way that she like truly hadn't anticipated, hadn't planned for, unfortunately. And, these amounts that can feel, maybe sort of insignificant in the scheme of your salary, can really, really make a big difference. And so I recommend like figuring out or trying to live on, especially if this is something that you're planning for over a slightly longer period of time. This was a fast change for this particular friend, but trying to live on that new salary for a few months and figuring out, whether it's a $1,000 a month, take-home pay reduction, or a $100 a month reduction, figure out like what that will actually do to your life. What do you have to change? What do you have to get rid of? And don't let that be your like 401k contribution. Oftentimes people will just change that to make up the difference, and that is not the best idea in most situations. So yeah, figuring out what it will actually do in your life to take this pay cut.
Yeah, And I want to reflect too, I want to share like the first point that you made. Once you do that inventory of your expenses and where your money is going, you may be able to find like a $1,500 a month savings, right? That you can then apply. And once you're making that shift, the third step might be a little bit easier, because then you are consciously spending your money, right, where you want it to go in areas that's important to you. And I want to talk a little bit about that. I want to talk about the values-based spending, because I know that's a big focus for you. Just a quick follow-up question, because I'm thinking of all of my members and clients who are in the midst of that career change right now, and it feels scary, right? And it's scary to hear you say like, oh my God, one of my friends, you know, she took the pay cut and now she's not happy. Like now she's struggling, and it sounds to me like there's like some regret there, right? So what do you say to those people who know they want to do something different? They want the work with more work-life balance, that's more values aligned, and it's going to require a pay cut. What is a way, right? Because I also don't think like, well, then don't make the change, right? Because the answer isn't to like stay in the job that you hate necessarily. So what does that balance look like? How can they make it work for them?
Yeah, I mean, I think this actually goes back to value-based spending also. So I can sort of talk about both together, because I think it's about figuring out where you can make the lowest impact cuts. And we want to focus our spending on the things that will bring us maximum value in our lives. And I know, like most things I say, this sounds a little simplistic, but it's really hard, and it requires a lot of like inner work and a lot of inner thought to figure out how to implement that on a daily basis. Because I don't know, to use myself as an example, I love to cook. I love, you know, like farmers market food and whatever. So a huge, you know, amount of my sort of food spending goes towards fancy ingredients and all of that, because that's what I really love doing. But then that means that I have to be really conscious and careful about money that I'm spending eating out. And I don't go out to eat with my friends as often, or well, we're in COVID right now, but in non-pandemic times, I don't go out to eat as much as a lot of other people, you know, a lot of other friends do, because I'm choosing to focus that money on, you know, groceries, which have for me a higher impact. And, you know, yeah, so it's just really about figuring out where you can make these cuts that won't feel as difficult, you know, so that you can then focus your spending on the things that bring the highest amount of impact in your life, that are most like aligned with your priorities and values.
I love that. I love that, because sometimes like the immediate feeling I used to get when I used to think about budgeting was this like limiting, restricting type of feeling, like, okay, like I have to take something away, something that I enjoy. And really what you're saying is, if we can align our spending with our values, I love that, what's going to bring the most value to me in my life. And I love just you focusing on these like fancy ingredients, but being okay with eating out less, because what's more important to you is the experience, right, that you're receiving from making your own food. Yeah. So I
how much, I mean, like it is so much more freeing to think of it from a positive lens of like, oh my gosh, I have whatever, $1,000 a month to spend towards travel, than it is to think like, you know, when you've made the cuts from the less important areas, than it is to think about like, oh my gosh, I have to limit my eating out to $200 a month. That's so difficult. You know, so when we can think of it from the more like positive mindset of like, I get to spend basically anything I want in these important areas, and all I have to do is like not spend on the stuff that I don't care about anyway. Like that is so freeing.
Yeah. I'm going to throw out a question to everybody who's watching, because I think this is just a powerful exercise to journal on after the call today. Just sitting with and asking yourself, what does it look like to align your spending with your values? What is it that's most important for you, right, when it comes to your life or the day-to-day experiences that you want to have, right? And then looking at that against your finances. So I just want to throw that out there. I think that's such a powerful question, you know, just to journal on it and just see what comes up for you. No expectations. I'm curious if anyone will have any insights.
I love that.
Yeah. Awesome. So we covered the three things. And we talked about a little bit with, you know, if you're making a career transition and it requires you to have a pay cut, like really testing out, you know, what it could look like within that new salary, right? What does your life look like within that new salary? Anything else that you want to share for people who are making that pivot and needing to take a pay cut? Anything else to add there?
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of sort of readjusting your spending and things, you know, I know I'm more talked about like cutting back in, you know, multiple smaller categories, but I think sometimes that one thing that can often really be helpful here is to make one big cut and like rip the Band-Aid off in a more sort of larger lifestyle decision. A good example is a client of mine, you know, recently decided that like instead of, they had to find like $3,000 to save in their budget because the math just wasn't adding up. And instead of making a lot of like, you know, yes, we could have slashed their grocery budget and all of these like 10 different things, you know, to make it work. But they instead decided to not have a nanny anymore, and that they would rely on like family and friends and sort of alter their work schedules and stuff and make it work, so that then the rest of their lifestyle didn't have to change at all. They just had to make this one huge cut, which certainly might not be fun, but sometimes can be easier in a lot of ways than having to micromanage your day-to-day spending. So I guess my point being, don't forget about like the big lifestyle changes that could be made in order to like make up for the money.
Yeah, that's interesting, right? So finding like one big thing, it might hurt, it might be a little painful, but then you're not like micromanaging a bunch of little things. What about, I know, again, I'm like thinking about my members and clients, and we have a good number of people in Work Bigger who transition careers, and instead of going to work for an organization, they go and they start their own businesses. And I see different things happening. You know, I know like they're trying to like maintain their savings. They're trying to live off of savings, right? So they need to make sure they have like a good, like just enough money to survive for X period of time. What do you say to people who are looking to start their own businesses? Like what have you seen is helpful in that regard?
Yeah, definitely. And that's such a great question and a great point that it's a big difference if you're preparing, you know, to find a new job in an organization versus starting a business. Because if there's one thing I'm sure about, it's that starting a business takes a lot longer than most of us think it will in order to be like truly, you know, profitable in the business. It takes longer than we anticipate. And my biggest piece of advice here is to be like radically honest with yourself about what your support system and what your risk tolerance look like. And by that, I mean, if you have a partner who is staying in their, you know, steady, secure, well-paying job, and yes, you're going from one salary or from two salaries to one, but like that other one is steady, you know, perhaps you can make the transition faster. Perhaps you can be a little bit riskier, you know, and because you know that like your bare minimum essentials will always be covered by your partner's salary. But then on the other hand, if let's say you're a single mom, you know, and you're a one income household with dependents, you know, you might not want to take this leap as fast. You know, you might want or need to be a little more measured, you know, to wait until you have a higher amount of savings, maybe to wait until maybe work part-time in your business. And, you know, like there's so many options, but I think just being honest with yourself about your own reality and figuring out a, you know, transition pathway that will make the best sense to you is my biggest advice. Because there's so many ways to go about it. I mean, I meet people who stayed in their full-time job until their business was making like triple the revenue of like with the revenue was triple of their salary, you know, and that was their target. And that to me, like there's no way I could have balanced both of those for so long. But I am single and I don't have dependents, and I have, a family who would help me if I needed to fall back on them. That is the reality of my life and my privilege and all of that. And I think that just as much as we can be honest with ourselves about that, then we can make the educated decision that's right for us.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And and highlighting different circumstances, right? And different levels of privilege require assessing the situation differently. I love that you highlighted the risk tolerance. I think that's really important. I've seen, like, if you take too much of a risk that is way beyond your comfort zone or what you can tolerate, it can lead to sabotaging yourself, right? Because then the stress is overwhelming. And I love that you highlighted the support system that looks very different for everyone, right? A single mom with kids is very different than somebody who's single or who has a partner and they don't have kids, right? There's so many things to consider. So thank you for calling that out.
Yeah. And I think one other thing I would add is, we think that like the internet sort of tends to glamorize like going full-time in your, business, or making like the leap really fast and having, faith in yourself or whatever, none of that needs to be your path. You can work like a couple hours a week in your side business until it generates an income that you could live on. Or, like there's so many things that the internet will tell you is like the right way to do it, that just aren't right for most of us. None of that boilerplate advice will ever suit, each of our individual needs.
Yeah, and I think that can be really discouraging too, when we just see like these success stories and they look really glamorous, and it's like we don't know what's behind that, right? And what's underneath that, and we don't know other people's circumstances. So
totally. Somebody I follow on Instagram, I really appreciated this. Recently, she said that she posted and said, one of those flashy, images of like, my business revenue was 150,000 last year, whatever. But then in her caption, she was like, but I need you to understand what that actually means. What that means is that I only paid myself $15,000 because yes, we had 150,000 of revenue, but here's all of the expenses that it went to. So, we see all of these like, alluring and glamorous posts, but most people don't share what that actually looks like underneath. And then, it can create so much stress and shame when you're not achieving what you think everybody else is achieving.
Yeah. And then that stress and shame, right, then really gets in the way of tackling the situation in a way that is possible for you, right? Because that, we shut down when we're in that place. For everybody who is listening, I'd love for you, again, I'm going to throw out these like prompts at you. I love doing this. My members and clients know this is just a coaching thing that we do in the community a lot, but I want you to think about, whether you're working for an organization or you're looking to transition to another organization that's more aligned with your values and your strengths and what you want to do, or you're, looking to start your own business. What's coming up for you as, Kate is sharing these tips? What are some of the insights that you're having around what's possible for you? And then also, what are some of those fears too that are present? Like, as you're listening to this, right? Take this moment. If there are certain fears or struggles that are coming up, I don't want you to shy away from those or to bury those. I actually want you to bring them to the surface, because that could really be an opportunity to dig a little bit deeper and to explore an area that needs looking into. So just think about wherever you are in this career transition, whether you want to make the move to running your business full time, or you want to move to another organization. Again, what are some of the insights that you're having as Kate is sharing? And then also, are there any fears or new questions that are popping up? And, just write them down as, in your notebook, your computer, wherever, and spend some time sitting and processing, because it'll be very telling, right, of what it is that you need to work on to move forward with your own transition and your own money journey. Kate, anything else that you think are attendees need to know or consider when, you know, just thinking about money and career?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, this is unrelated to other stuff that we've talked about so far, but I would say like really, really, really try to maximize the way that you're taking advantage of all of the benefits that your company has to offer. And that's something that, especially if you're looking to transition into starting your own business, like you will see that none of those perks exist any longer. And so really taking advantage of it. You know, a lot of people, you know, will sort of set their 401k contribution level once, but then not adjust it as their salary goes up, or as, you know, perhaps they move in with a partner and, you know, household income goes up. So I would say like continuing to really like flex your muscles of like how much you're choosing to, you know, contribute to your 401k, contribute to, you know, your HSA if you have one, you know, all of these things, like making sure you're thinking about thinking at least of taking advantage of any stock offerings that your company has, especially if you're with like a big established company. These things, you know, require some like thought and planning, because, you know, there'll be like taxes due when you know, take advantage of the stock options and stuff like that. So I would just say that, you know, while you're in your current role, make sure you're maximizing everything that it has to offer as much as possible. You know, maybe go in and like up your 401k contribution by 1% or something, because like while you're, you know, earlier in your career, you know, I don't mean that like everybody watching this is 22 or something and just starting their job, but like the earlier you can do the most of that, the better it will do for you, because the effects of it just compound and compound and compound over years. Yeah. So what might only be like a $1,000 a year difference now will be, you know, will compound to like 100,000 in retirement. And that's not something to sneeze at. So make sure you're taking advantage of it.
Yeah, that's such a great example. And I was thinking, because I'm married with 2 kids, and my husband works in, you know, he works in corporate, he's at an agency, whereas, you know, I run Work Bigger full time. And he's like very conscious of like, what are all the benefits that, you know, that we receive through his company. And, you know, obviously like nobody's going to the gym right now, but that's like little benefits like that you know, I worked in corporate too, and it's just things that you forget, or that you don't take advantage of, or that you say like, okay, well, I'll do this later. And there's a lot of ways just to even like look into it, like what is your company offering right now that maybe you could take advantage of.
Totally. And I mean, I speak to many people who are like not contributing to their 401k, like all of these things, and just, you know, I mean, not to throw it, like there are certainly circumstances in life where perhaps you're like actually unable to for various reasons, but for a lot of people, that is not the case. And so just starting with even like a small amount really makes a difference.
Awesome. All right. Well, I would love to, should we dive into Q&A, Kate? I'm really curious. And I see the chat is, thank you everyone for just sharing your thoughts. Keep going. I'm going to read what Stephanie shared in a little bit. I'm going to jump into the Q&A box. If you have a question, I think I saw some coming through the chat, but I haven't been able to read through that. So I especially want you all to just think about like your own situations, right? And we have Kate here as our special guest. So this is an opportunity to get some support. So I'm going to read the questions that came in. So this is from Camilla. Camilla, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. How can we incorporate these ideas of tracking during really unstable times with varying income levels, such as 2020? What a great question.
Yeah, thank you, Camilla. That's such a good question. I would say, first off, income doesn't affect tracking of spending. So trying to like separate those two apart, because your income might be unstable, but like if, you know, you still got to know what your spending does, because spending is oftentimes more stable than income is. And my second piece of advice for this is always, I know that this is not always possible like to a T, but trying to even out the income you are paying yourself as much as possible. So the starting point for this is like making sure that your business and personal finances are separate, you know, so that you have a separate bank account. This is true regardless of the structure of your business or anything. You can always have a separate bank account for it. And starting to think of like business revenue as a separate discussion from like personal income. So let's say there's a month where you make $10,000 and then the next month you only make 1,000, and the month after that you make 3,000. Okay, so we can start to figure out that that averages to about 4,000 a month. And so maybe you look at paying yourself an income of 3,000 a month. And then you can start to like, you know, that requires a little restraint on the month that you make 10,000, you know, to only pay yourself 3,000. But that allows yourself to start actually planning, you know, on the personal level. And this is something for business owners that I always try to like triple reiterate, which is that fundamentally, like, our business is meant to serve us, you know, not the other way around. And I think as business owners, we forget that. We're all often so focused on our business and its success and all of that, that we forget to like take care of ourselves first. So I think as much as like, especially in an unstable time like this, that you can reorient the focus to personal, I think that'll like achieve the most success.
I love that. Thank you, Kate, for sharing that. The book Profit First comes to mind.
Yeah.
If you are a small business owner or you're looking to be one, I highly recommend that book. It's exactly what Kate is talking about, really prioritizing yourself in your business, or whether you're a freelancer, consultant, have more of that like fluid income. That it's a great framework. Okay, I'm going to move on to Julie Ann's question. What questions do you have, or what suggestions do you have for people who are looking to completely change career paths? For example, we're going back to school for a graduate degree to make, like, where that's necessary. What do you do? And then how do we need to think about this differently while budgeting for school and essentially starting over? Mm-hmm. Yes, it sounds like, yeah, graduate school is a consideration, and that is an added expense.
Yeah, and for grad school especially, I know that, especially if it's like later in your career, I like to take a sort of like unglamorous approach to it and really try and think of like what your return on investment will be for it. And I know that that's oftentimes not what we want to think about, but to give a couple examples from my own personal life, a few years ago, a friend was making $50,000 as like a marketing assistant. And, you know, she went and got a design master's that, you know, yes, cost $50,000, but then immediately after, her salary tripled. So that is a very, like, she went from making $50,000 to 18 months later, $150,000. And, you know, so that is like tangibly worth it. And I know that that's not oftentimes what we like to think of when we're talking about, you know, education and things. But I think just being sort of honest to yourself about if it will have that monetary payoff, if that's something that you care about. If it's not, you know, acknowledge that to yourself. So that is my first piece of advice. Yeah, and then I'd say, you know, obviously when you're in school, oftentimes you're not able to work. So this really comes down to a personal decision of, do you want to hold off grad school long enough so that you're able to save enough cash, at least for living expenses during the time? Or do you want to add in your living expenses to the loans you're taking out? Or back to our prior conversation, do you have a partner or somebody else who will support you through this process? You know, those are all like super different situations, and there's no necessary, like, there's not necessarily a right or wrong, but it's, again, just making like those eyes wide open, you know, assessing all of the information and like making a decision with your eyes open.
Yeah, I love it. You're such a realist. Like, I'm all about
when it comes to money, you know, you have to be, I think. I know that oftentimes, you know, when it comes to like education and careers, we're not, but I think that like one thing about money is that, you know, though it's not the most important thing in our lives. I would never pretend that money is the most important thing. It is essential for most of the important things. You know, you need money to raise children. You need money to take care of your parents. You need money to go visit your friends. You know, you need money for almost all of like the great things in life. And, you know, I don't think that's, you know, I think it's the more that we can like acknowledge that and like move, you know, forward with that knowledge. Doesn't mean that we're making like greedy money-based decisions, but more just sort of, you know, honest approaches to it.
Totally. And I think it's so important. I think that's part of the money mindset too, that we all need to work on. Again, there's so much shame around money. And to me, it's like, if we could flip that and really look at money as a tool that makes so much possible for us, right? And the way you're speaking to it, Kate, is like, look at the reality of your situation, really assess the circumstances, see what's possible for you, and use money as that tool, right, to create, right, or to do the things that align with your values and with who you are. That's really the message that I'm getting from you, and I think it's an important one. So thank you so much, Julie, for asking that question. I think that's a really important one. Emily says, I love this question. How do you convince other members of your household to stick to your budget, especially if they're not as disciplined as you?
Yeah, Emily, this is a great question and is a struggle that certainly anybody I've ever worked with has. You know, when I work with couples, there's always one person that is more focused on the budget than the other. And I think for here that like, the way I'd want to reframe it is, how do we work the flexibility that my family member or my partner needs like into the budget? You know, how do we acknowledge the fact that they're not as rigid about it, not as disciplined about it as you are, and make room for that? You know, what is the area that they need a little bit more room in? For one client that's popping to mind, one of the spouses is a stay-at-home parent and grocery shops a lot. You know, they make all the food for the family and like they just do a lot of that. And, you know, we just decided like, okay, this is not where, like, yes, we could probably save a few $100 a month if we are like hyper rigid here, but that is not what the stay-at-home parent needs, is to have to be like really, really, really rigid. Like, can I afford to buy salmon for dinner tonight? Or did I already have, you know, salmon last week and I need to buy chicken tonight? You know, what, like that was not what they needed. And so I think like reframing the budget to be a tool that'll really work for your life and creating the freedom and flexibility that it requires, so that it's not a restrictive, you know, difficult thing, but really a tool to give you like freedom in your life.
Yeah, that's such a good point. What is it that they need? What is it that they're getting through the spending, right? And really approaching the conversation from that way, like what is underneath that? Because it sounds like, I'm just thinking about, I'm making assumptions here, but with your, you know, the client who's a stay-at-home mom, for her, it probably gives her a level of freedom and creativity, right? She's getting to cook different meals. I'm envisioning this just as an example, but just to highlight that, you know, if there's other people in your household where you have like those different values and different approach around money, like I'm definitely more of the spender in our family. And my husband is the one who like goes and finds all the deals when he's grocery shopping, and I just don't think like that. But to approach the conversation from like, what is it that the other person needs? And that way you can work with them on that, right? Versus staying at like the like just the budget conversation, right? Because I always think it goes deeper.
Totally. And I also just realized that I do want to add in that I want to acknowledge the difference between just not being super disciplined with spending versus like having sort of more like a compulsive like spending shopping behavior. And, you know, to use that same example of, you know, the mom with the groceries, like that is really the only area that she needs this like extra freedom. And so that we were able to work out. But sometimes I'll have clients who, you know, really are doing a lot of shopping, like outside of their means, like truly like spending thousands of dollars more than they're earning. And that is a different conversation versus just like not as like disciplined about finding deals and stuff. So I think figuring out like, yeah, where it's coming from and like what the effect of it is important.
Yeah, that's a good distinction. Awesome. Thank you, Emily, for asking that question. Okay, I'm gonna go to Brianna. Brianna, what are ways a person can budget during this time?
Yeah, so I think that, I mean, for all of us, the pandemic has been a really different time than normal. Some people are really suffering financially now, and some people who are in more corporate jobs and have, you know, been fortunate enough to keep their employment are actually, you know, earning, well, their earning is the same, but their spending is down a lot. And so there's more free cash for a lot of folks I speak to now. And so I think it, again, you know, comes back to like figuring out where you're actually at right now. Like, what is the issue you're looking to solve? Do you, by asking that, like, do you want to, you know, are you spending way more than you're earning right now? You know, is, you know, you're earning really irregular? You know, what are, like, I think that we oftentimes, especially with the pandemic, like to think of it as an isolated situation, you know, but it's been happening and it's continuing to happen. And hopefully, you know, I know there is an end in sight, but it's a longer term, you know, picture than we thought of, at least at first. So I think the more that we can reframe it away from thinking of it as like a unique circumstance versus like, and reframing it to like, this is what life is like right now. And how can my spending and income work for whatever my reality is right now. And if that reality changes again in 6 months, when the pandemic is hopefully over, you know, then you can create a new budget. You know, budgets should be flexible and they should move with your life. They shouldn't be a rigid, constrictive, you know, forever plan. So I hope that if you have a more, like, I want to make sure I'm answering your question. So if there's a more, like, anything more specific that you want me to address, please put it in the chat, because I'm not sure if I answered your question.
Yeah, no, and Kate, thank you. Yeah, Brianna, for sure. If there's more specifics, please share, because topic of budgeting is can feel kind of broad. Yeah. But Kate, what I love that you just called out is to be present and accepting of the current situation, which is so hard. Mm-hmm. You know, there's just a lot. It's such a challenging time, and it's hard to accept that. But again, like, you know, you're just sharing, like, look at your spending and come up with a budget that applies to your circumstances now. Mm-hmm. And then when it's time to revisit that. Yeah,
so like for all of my clients, really that's what we're doing. We're not right now thinking of, you know, what will you want to spend once the world opens up again? You know, we're really figuring out, like, okay, given the current reality where you're not traveling, you're not going out to eat, you know, how do we want to allocate your money now? That probably means more can go towards debt and savings than usual. And then, yeah, you can reassess it once things open up. And like, I want everybody to go on vacation once the world is open. So you can reassess then.
Yeah. Yeah, we have about 5 more minutes. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to share, Kate, do you want to share a little bit about the worksheet that you have for everyone?
Yeah.
I'd love for you all. It's a money saving guide. I'm going to pop it here in the chat. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so this is just my little guide for like 7 ways that you can, you know, boost your bank account and save money today. You know, I think that oftentimes like getting these quick wins are what we need. And I always, with all of my clients, with anybody I speak to, want to start with like, what can we change today? Like, we'll work on the larger picture, like as time goes by, but like, how can we find you some wins today? Like, how can we, you know, so this is all like the sort of low hanging fruit of just changes that you can make today, this week, you know, to improve your money.
Yeah, perfect. So I've shared the link in the chat.
Thank you.
Download it, Yeah, and take a look. And yeah, I love the quick win. That's something we talk about a lot at Work Bigger. It's when you experience that win and that success, it gives you more energy to keep doing what you're doing. And I think that's especially relevant with money, and it applies to that budgeting concept, because budgeting has like more of that like contracting, not very positive feeling, right? So if you can set yourself up to succeed, even if it's little baby steps, like do the littlest thing, that has a huge impact, and that inspires, like it pushes you to keep going and to keep taking action. Renee says, I'd love to see the spreadsheet. Kate, what is the best way for everyone to get
Yeah, I'm just going to put my email address in the chat. And if anybody wants to email me, I can send it to you. It's not something that I have available anywhere, but I will send it to you if you want to email me. And yeah, I'm always here to like chat with any one of you. On my website, there's a time to book a time to chat, and I'm happy to spend that time sort of troubleshooting your individual finances and all that. So please don't hesitate to reach out.
Stephanie, yes, the book is Profit First, and I'm just sharing Kate's Instagram and LinkedIn, and then is it beyondmoney.co?
It is, yeah.
Beyondmoney.co to connect. Sorry. Awesome. Well, as we're wrapping up here, I see there's one more question. So, okay, I'm gonna read Brianna's question. Brianna, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. I always want to make sure. So if I'm not, just let me know in the chat. But she says, I live with my parents and I'm currently searching for a new career path. I'm 30, so when I'll start a new job, I want to learn how to budget during this situation. Okay, yeah, any thoughts, Kate?
Yeah, so I think like the same principles apply. I think that obviously each of our lives are always going to be unique. None of us have the exact same circumstances or anything, but sort of the principles of like your budget is how much money are you bringing in? And if the answer is zero, then the answer is zero. And how much money are you spending? And you need to, like, fundamentally, we all need to figure out how to most successfully reconcile the two. So whether you're spending from savings as you're starting a business or whatever you're doing, you want to figure out like, what's the equation between earning minus spending? And you certainly don't want the spending to be higher than the earning, and you want them to be pretty equal when you're including financial priorities in the spending. So by spending, I don't mean, just grocery shopping and stuff, but I mean like, where are you allocating your money? And that includes savings and debt payment and spending. So you want those to be equal. And that is true regardless of income or asset level or job or anything.
Perfect. And Brianna, it might help too to just look at her guide and see what those 7 tips are that Kate walks you through. Awesome.
And there's one more question from Brittany.
Brittany, do you have resources to help determine work value like Glassdoor? So Brittany, it sounds like what like different salaries are, right, for different companies. That's what I'm assuming. And then Stephanie brought up negotiations. So that's a great question. Where can people learn about like accessing salary information?
Yeah, so honestly, this is, I think, probably more Belma's area of expertise than mine. I think that, like, yes, obviously use publicly available information like Glassdoor, but take it with a grain of salt, because you don't know who's putting it there, if it's updated, if it's accurate, what other perks are coming with their salary, what the bonus structure's like, all of that. So I think my best advice is what I repeated. It's not my advice, but what I repeated from Aminatou So is just to message people and like have the hard conversations and ask real people in your city in similar roles, like what they are earning. And yeah, that's the best advice I've got personally.
Yeah, I love that advice. I love that too. I do recommend Glassdoor. That's what I recommend to a lot of our clients. But I think reaching out and again, having those hard conversations and getting like those facts from people who are actually at that company, no matter how vulnerable it can feel, I know that can feel really uncomfortable. And Brittany, you're in the community, so we can always talk about ways to approach that, right? You know, how to have those hard conversations so that, you know, you feel prepared and confident versus like you have that like super awkward feeling. So we can definitely talk about that on one of our group coaching calls if it would be helpful for you. But yeah, I love that advice. And with that, we're going to wrap up for today. I just want to thank you all so much for joining and for being present and for asking the questions and everything you shared in the chat. And I really want to thank you, Kate, for taking the time to be here with Work Bigger today and sharing all of your insights and advice and your guide. And I'm going to send out a recording of this with Kate's guide. So if anybody has any follow-up questions, please reach out to me or Kate. Kate, any closing thoughts?
No, it was so great to be here with you guys today. Thank you for having me. And just to reiterate what Belma said, thank you for asking such engaging questions. That always makes it a lot more fun on our ends when they're interesting, you know, thoughtful questions. So thank you very much.
Yeah, amazing. All right, everyone. We'll chat soon. And thanks again, Kate. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.